Are you ready to take your business to the next level and make the money you want so that you can create the impact you desire? Then you're in the right place. It's possible to run a successful business built around your life. Get ready for a little bit of tough love and a whole lot of strategy to grow your business without sacrificing your sanity. If you're ready to get out of your own way and step into the role of CEO, then let's go. I'm Amy Traw, and this is the Motivated CEO Podcast. How would you like to work less and easily scale your business? Well, today's guest has the solution that you've been searching for. I have Kris Ward with me. She is a leading authority in team building and systems, and I am so excited for her to share just pure strategy. So, Kris, welcome into the podcast, and I would love you to unpack this for us. What is the secret? What do you mean work less? I thought we were supposed to hustle more in business.
Oh my gosh. Listen, if I only do one thing in this lifetime is to let people know that you should have a business that supports your life instead of consuming it. That is it. Write that down. That is everything. And that life has interruptions. So you have to have a business that can support it instead of consuming it. Otherwise, it's really like having a car that can only drive in good weather.
I love that analogy. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So, if this is the key that we need to be doing this to build a sustainable business, why aren't we all doing it?
Well, because here's the thing is first, there's so many things. Oh my gosh.
Sure.
I'm going to pay attention. I'll tell you 4 stories at one time. First of all is, when we started this business, we started with the startup, right? And so then you crawl out of survival mode and it was so hard and it was such a climb and you're doing so many things at once. And then you get into, if you're lucky, stationary mode. We know like something like 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. So then you go, okay, great. I'm here. I'm stationary. I'm doing fine. But what got you here will not get you there. And being in stationary mode still means you're working way too many hours for where you are at this point in the journey. And so what you need to get from is stationary mode to scalable. Like, okay, great. I've got a sustainable business. A lot of my clients look really good on paper. They've got a podcast or a book, or they're doing fine in theory, but they're putting in way too many hours for where they are at this point in their journey. They're burning through their burnout budget. And then also if they really look at it on paper, they're making a lot less money than they thought, because when you do anything for 16 hours a day, it doesn't turn out to be that lucrative, right? So there's that big piece that no one talks to you about. And then there's the other thing where everything that we value in most cultures is, hey, you're a really hard worker. And then you hear these stories of, oh my gosh, I started my business and I make all this money now. And I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor and I was working on these hours. But what they don't tell you is when their life turned around, when the business started to take off, is when they then put some things in play and had some streamlined processes and start to build a team. Those rookie years where had very dramatic stories to tell you were not the years that the business took off. So, we know they sound much more dramatic and interesting, but it's not where the lessons are learned.
Yeah, it makes for a darn good story though, doesn't it? But you're absolutely right. We praise this like hard workers, like look at how hard this person's working day in and day out. And we're often comparing ourselves, but what we're doing is we're just ending up burnt out, stressed out, overwhelmed, questioning why we left a 9 to 5 in order to work 24/7. And I feel like we know this, but it's so counterintuitive because it's been ingrained in us forever. I come from a career where productivity was praised. That was part of your performance appraisal, was how hard of a worker are you? So I think it's a really, really hard pattern to break, especially when you are moving from solopreneur, getting out of that stationary mode and into scaling your business. So where does someone even start?
Okay. First, I want to unpack a couple of things you just said, though, that I
Yeah.
thought were really profound, because I remember one night. Let me back up for a second. Okay. So I started my business 14 plus years ago. In the first couple of years of my work, I was focused on market messaging, dealing with that, helping people with that service. And the first couple of years I was in business, I worked insane hours. And my husband said, you know what? You're always stealing from sleep. You're getting up earlier and earlier, staying up later and later. Like that can be the first place you go. I was also told about the 2-year mark that I was starting to lose some of my charm. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this cannot be. He's my biggest fan. He's, doing all these things to support me. So I literally went from working 16 hours a day down to 6. Now that did not happen overnight. That's a whole story on its own. But moving this story along, why that's really important is a couple of years after that, my husband was diagnosed with colon cancer and I was pulled away from the business for about 2 years. When I returned after his passing, my existing clients had no idea of my absence. And they kept saying to me, how could we have not known? And it was just not how we navigated his journey. We're very positive in nature. And so they started to say to me, like, hey, if you could do that, maybe you could help me get to my kids' soccer games and get some of my life back. And so I started working with these clients under that capacity. And one thing led to another. And I wrote my book, Win the Hour, Win the Day. And I realized that these are the people I needed me most, the ones that, again, looked good on paper. And my clients all say they get 25 hours back a week within the first month of working with us. But what that lends itself to is something you just said that's really powerful. I remember back in the early years, one night I was working at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd been up since 5. And I was thinking, there are laws in the land to protect me from this. Like people fought and died for labor laws so that this could not be. And here I am getting around these loopholes by working for myself. And you're right. That's the whole thing on productivity. We tend to also think that when you go fast and you work hard, that means, you can go fast on a rocking chair, but you're not getting anywhere, right? Or a dog can dig a hole really fast. Okay, we got the hole. What's the purpose, right? So we want to really understand that what are we being productive about? And after working with so many entrepreneurs, I've also noticed that they fell into one of 5 categories. So we have this quiz, which is really interesting. You can check it out at www.freegiftfromkris.com, free GIFT from Kris, KRIS.com. And one of the interesting things is I myself am what I call a recovering rushaholic. I thought speed was my superpower. But what I didn't realize is I was skimming over things. I wasn't getting traction or depth. I was just always rushing to the next thing. So you're right. So many of us are taught that means we're working hard. So where do we start? Well, to simplify this, I would say that my clients, we focus on your team, your time, and your toolkits. Your team, having a virtual assistant, which we will find, hire and on board for you. It's a philosophy, not a number. So you can have a team of 1. Your time, 90% of people do not know how to use their calendar. They also look for more time when it's about energy management, not time management. And then your toolkit, so many of us have either pushed back or started using SOPs, standard operating procedures, and they're not written by the end user usually. They're static in nature. They take a long time to make. They become outdated really quickly. Our signature super toolkits, the biggest difference between that and SOPs is their ease of use, ease to create, and how they constantly give you time back so that you can move on to your next ambition.
Ooh, very, very cool. And it really sounds like you're saying so much of it comes back to being intentionally focused. Stop doing all of the things. So you mentioned team. Does this look like we just need to delegate everything out, or how does this work? Can you unpack that a little bit deeper for us?
Yeah, so there's a word I'm going to push back on a little bit. It's the commonly used word, and you're right, delegate. So I tell people all the time that delegating is a lateral move. The work still has to come through you. So that's why that doesn't work. It's time consuming. So I'm not actually into delegating. I'm into a setup where your team is liberated. When we hire on board a virtual assistant for you, we put them through our leadership program. And with the super toolkits, they're given work of so that they have independent work instead of the delegation coming through you, right? And the super toolkits self-correct and do all these things. So you don't have to supervise their work. That's just not how we set things up. So that delegation takes time. And that's why, and we get so many of our ideas from the corporate world, and they're very flawed even for the corporate world. But we tend to think, oh, because it's a corporate world, it's a big building and they make lots of money, we don't notice how much money they're wasting or how these systems don't work. But think about it like, Amy, if you were, really good at sales and you're working for a corporation and they say, Amy, you're so good at sales. We want you, to be the sales manager. Well, then all you do is start managing the other salespeople. You don't do sales, or you do a lot less sales. And so that's what happens when you start delegating. You bring somebody on. Now that's where people say, oh, it's easier just to do it myself because now I have to manage them. That's because the setup is flawed. You don't have our signature super toolkits. You're relying on SOPs that become outdated. They're clunky. They're mixed up with training. You don't know how to create leaders, because people talk about leadership, but they tend to talk about it in the capacity of, oh, I need leadership skills so that others will follow me and do as they're told. When you want to be surrounded by leaders, if you hop on one of our daily Scrum meetings with my team, you'd have a hard time telling who's in charge. And that's a strength, right? Because then I'm working with my peers. So there's some real fundamentals that we're throwing around that often are misused and not helpful.
What an awesome perspective, because I agree 1000%. Delegation, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of brain capacity that we're using up as so much energy, because if we're constantly in that role, we're having to delegate. Yeah, it still has to go through us. So it is a fundamentally flawed setup.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense. But when you're surrounded by leaders, I mean, there's so much strength in that. So if we can go back and change how we're approaching this, that's a huge light bulb moment right there. It makes sense. It will save us time. It will save us energy. It will give us that time back in our day.
Yeah. So we often think, no, everybody thinks their business is different. And so many times I just hear people, myself included, back in the dark years, I call them, just think, well, there's too much work. So I had this client that came to me and she was referred to us by somebody else. And I'm not saying it's okay, but this does happen a fair bit when somebody's meeting with me. Things are, stressed. They're just, so many of us keep thinking, once we get past this next thing, things will be different. But when you hear yourself saying that, ding, 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 that's an alarm bell. So,
Yeah.
so she went to meet with me. And as I said, it's not okay, but this sometimes happens. She missed her first appointment because they're just all over the map. Okay, no problem. It happens. So we reschedule. She missed the second appointment. And I'm like, okay, I'm out. We're done.
Yeah.
But because she was a referral, she begged me, please, I'm so sorry. I promise you I'll show up for the third one, please. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So she shows up. Now she started working with us, and she didn't tell me this till later, but she said she was on medication to sleep at night because her cortisol and her adrenaline was just so high. She was working insane hours. Within the year, and I have clippings from our session, so it's not even a revised testimonial, it's just raw stuff. Within the year, her income went up 4 times. Her hours went down to 1/5. And here's the interesting thing I forgot to tell you. She said in the beginning, I don't even know, Kris, how you're going to help me, because she helped large organizations that were $5 to $10 million get ready with their systems to sell their business. And she said, I help them with the systems. There's just too much work. How can you help me? And I said, well, I don't know, but we haven't failed yet. So within the year, she's making 4 times the amount of money. She's down to 150 hours. Within a year, she went to Costa Rica, left her business with the VA that we found, hired, and on board for her, and had no Wi-Fi in Costa Rica for a month, and came back and everything was perfect. Right? So that's what you need to understand. It's just really basic things you have to put in play, that you can't run out in between jumping around on your to-do list and try to put these things in there that frankly are a whole nother career that you know nothing about, and then wonder why it's not happening for yourself.
That's amazing. So, with that example, would you mind sharing with us what was step one of that process? What did that look like? Because obviously
Well,
everyone's situation is different, but if you could offer one piece of advice that we could take from her.
sure. There's lots of things that we can always do. So, we do always start wherever you're at. So it's very custom to your work. But I will give you some things just that anybody can implement today, because I'm all about tangible takeaways. So The super toolkits are a little bit more elaborate. I mean, they're easy to make dynamic documents, super easy, but it's not something sadly that I can do in 5 minutes, right? And then a virtual assistant, we've got a 12-point hiring process with a 90% retention rate. And it's a whole beautiful thing. We're talking like $5, $6 an hour. So many of our clients came and they're paying something like 50, $60 an hour, and they just weren't getting the return on their investment. And then we find someone for them like, oh my gosh, Kris, like I would have kept that other person if they had been this effective, right? But here's some basics you can do today. So many people do not know how to use their calendar. Their calendar is set up for external forces only. So if I have an appointment with you today, Amy, it's on my calendar. But what happens is they don't put their own work on the calendar. They're like, oh, Kris, I do that every day. I don't need to put that in the calendar. I remember that. Well, first of all, business is not run on memory. Secondly, that's like saying to me, oh, my car payment comes out every month, but I don't count it because it comes out every month. Well, that money is still gone. So what happens is when you don't put your own work on the calendar, you may stumble into the workday thinking you have 8 hours and you may only have 5. So right off the bat, your math is completely off. And then you're running around like a lunatic thinking, why can I not get things done? But you're, spending time and money you don't have. The other thing I would say is the work that requires the most attention or focus, you do the first hour of the day. Hopping into your email is coming from a position of fear, and you're eating up your decision fatigue and your attention residue, right? Huge. So you want to do the work that requires the most attention or focus. I have no patience for this foolishness of eat the frog first. You shouldn't have the damn frog on your plate. You don't need the frog. There's no need for there to be a frog. Don't eat the frog. The VA will deal with the frog stuff. There's no frogs. There is nothing I hate to do that I have to do. Nothing, right? In the workday, right? So now we're doing the work that requires the most attention or focus first. Another thing people don't talk about is working backwards. We do this in our personal life. Let's say, Amy, you say, I have to be at the in-laws Saturday at 1 for somebody's birthday. And you're like, okay, that's an hour away. It's 12. Okay, I want to work out, so I'm going to do that. But it means I have to get ready at 11. So you do the math and you might find out you have to get up at 10 to be somewhere at 1. As entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, small business owners, or founders, we get excited about new business or a new project. We jump all in, guns a-blazing, and then other things get neglected or things happen. And what happens is, we don't know when we're off course, or other things get, as I said, neglected. So what you want to be looking at is, when I wrote my book, Win the Hour, Win the Day, I learned that I had to have it to the editors by June, or she couldn't look at it till September. So I did the math, and it looked like I had to do 5 pages per day, Monday to Friday, to get that book in on time. Now, most people, myself included, in their early years, would be like, okay, I'm going to get up, and at the end of the busy day, I'm going to, when my brain is all beaten up and tired, I'm going to write some of my book. And then today it doesn't happen because it got busy. And they're like, well, you know what? Tomorrow the pages will just fly off. We'll be totally fine, right? Because there's nothing more hopeful than tomorrow. What would happen is, because I do the most important work first thing in the morning, I would have to make a choice. Just like when I get up every morning to work out, am I going to work out today or not? There's no falseness about it. If I don't do it now, it doesn't get done. So then I say, oh, no, I'm not going to write my book today. Okay, A, why? B, I don't have it in me today. Okay, if I don't have it in me today, if I don't have 5 pages in me today, will I have 10 in me tomorrow? Not so much. So that sobers you up really quickly and keeps you on track. So I find that working backwards gives you great clarity, and then you can be realistic, and also then you can set projects that get done because you have a plan in place versus just some ambiguous ambition. People will say, well, I have a goal to do that this quarter. Well, where's the plan? You've got a goal. What's the strategy? Somebody can have a goal to lose 50 pounds by Christmas. Where's the plan? Right? So those are some key things that should help you today.
Oh my goodness. Rewind what Kris just said. Write it down. I swear, Kris, if I would have heard that when I first started my business, I would be so much further along. I still remember, because I came from an outpatient career. So I had my schedule laid out for me. Every half hour, my days, working 40 hours a week, it was laid out. Every single half hour, I saw another patient. I struggled. I
Yeah.
struggled with this hard when I first became an entrepreneur because it was like, well, now I have all day to get these things done. And it's so easy to put it off. Like, oh, yeah, I'll get to that later. Oh, yeah. I literally did exactly what you said. I had to put everything on a calendar to hold myself to that standard because that's how my brain functioned. And that's how most of our brains function. We need to take that decision fatigue out of the equation because you're absolutely right. We get so wrapped up in all these decisions all day long that nothing actually gets done then. That was such a game-changing moment. So I am encouraging you, like, I can 1000% like attest to this. Do it. Seriously, as weird, as silly as it feels, because it's new. Just write it down. Start using your time that you have to your advantage because then what happens is you don't have to work as much. It's beautiful. You get so much done in such a shorter period of time because it keeps you on track. And in an era, an age where there's so many distractions, gosh, we need it. We really need this.
Yeah. And I would just add, this is where sometimes people get confused and it turns into busy work. Do it in 1 hour blocks. That's why it's win the hour, win the day. And so in that 1 hour block, you might have at 11 o'clock, okay, I'm going to do all communication. That means email and phone calls, right? Don't start busying your calendar with it's not a to-do list. I don't believe in to-do lists at all. To-do lists are excellent if you're looking for additional stress or unfinished projects, or because all they are percolating lists of emergencies. So don't turn your calendar into a to-do list. Okay. What I'm saying is plan your work in 1 hour increments, and then another little hack is first thing I do every morning is I look at my calendar and I alert some device to say, okay, I've got this meeting with Amy. So then I say, okay, set an alarm at 11:50, at 12:50, at 1:50. So I could be deep in work and alarm goes off, go, oh, right. Thank heavens. Because I have had people over the years for sure. Oh my gosh, I was busy in deep work and I'm so sorry I missed our appointment. I'm so embarrassed. They just had to set an alarm. And secondly, then your brain is constantly switching back and forth. You don't give something full attention because you're like, wait, what time is it? Right. And so we really want it not to have divided energy. So just some basics like that are step one.
Oh, so good. And what you said, to-do lists are percolating lists of emergencies. That will like forever live on my brain because it is a fact. And
Yeah.
yeah, I also have like 50,000 alarms set on my phone. It's always 10 minutes before the task because it gives me
Yeah.
time to move from one thing to another. So if you are listening to this episode, take one of these strategies and implement it. Start, try it. See how it feels for you because it is possible. It is possible to work less and it feels weird at first. But gosh, it is so worth it because isn't that the dream that we all say we want? We want more freedom and flexibility. I hear that over and over and over, but you can make it a reality. Implement what you have learned from Kris. Go to her website, freegiftfromkris.com. It will be linked in the show notes. Grab it and start taking action on these strategies because exactly as you said, win the hour and you win your day.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And there's no reason why you cannot work what I call school hours, long weekends, summers, and then 6 hours a day, easily done. My clients go through it all the time. It's incredibly doable.
I love it. Kris, thank you so much for being such a wealth of information, for sharing just so many actionable strategies. You are truly changing lives. I appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you for trusting me with your audience. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And until next time, cheers to making the money you want so you can create the impact you desire. Are you loving what you're hearing? Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode.